Let's get started right on time. My name is Dewey Evans. I'm the performance architect. As you can see, oops, that's not where I am. That's where I usually am when I'm doing podcasts, but not where I am today. Here I am. So I think my audio is a little bit loud, so I'm going to just take a second and turn it down here just a smidge. That looks like it might be a bit better. Okay, I'm Dewey Evans. I am the performance architect. And what are we doing tonight? Well, we're doing the first of what will be a weekly thing, the Tuesday tennis parent Tuesdays, where I'm going to sit here and I'm going to talk to you and you're going to talk back to me and we're going to figure some stuff out. So kind of take the 35 years of experience that I have and we're going to kind of truck right on through it. So yeah, it's going to be, tonight is player development plans and supporting versus living through your child. What do we think that means? Well, I think we all probably have a pretty good idea. I was looking at Facebook today and I saw somebody who had a picture of "I can't do it." And I probably should have taken a picture of it to share it here. But he was then cutting off the apostrophe T on can't in order to make that little card say, "I can do it." And I thought to myself, wow, when did I stop doing this thing? I used to have a thing where whenever somebody said, "I can't," a kid, I would make them say, "I can do it, just stick to it." And the kids all got to where they could say it pretty well, or they stopped saying "I can't," because "I can't" isn't one of those things that is acceptable. Then I wondered, when did I stop doing that? Right, there are all kinds of things that have happened that when I go watch other people teach tennis and I see them do something, I'm like, I used to do that. I wonder when I stopped doing that. Well, I don't know, but how many people, parents, coaches, abandon effective things thinking that there's something better? And how do we connect and support our kids as we go? Today I made a post about player development plans and I thought, well, what is a player development plan? And it's a roadmap. It should be a living, breathing document. Those of you who have been fortunate enough to have a player development plan written for your children or developed for your player probably could go find it in a drawer someplace. I don't know if it probably ever moved out of that drawer since the time that it was created. But it should be a systematic way of moving your child through the journey, aligning all parts of their team, the coaches, the players, the kids. And it should be something that can be measurable, right? You hear of so SMART goals and they should be specific and measurable and all of those things. And absolutely, they should be something, not just the wins and losses, right? Wins and losses are great, but what do they really mean? Maybe you're playing somebody who was not nearly at your level or somebody who was really, really, really good, right? Like if I were to go play Carlos Alcaraz, I would find out that he is really good and I was probably never good enough to be on the court with him. Certainly not now at my age, but that would be all I would learn. So measuring that as a win or a loss wouldn't really be super valuable. we should be looking at all four of the performance pillars, right? What are the four performance pillars? The technical, tactical, psychological, and physical. Those are the four legs on the stool. If any one of those legs is, to me, the biggest one, though, is communication. How do we effectively create communication between all members of the team? How do we make sure that the way that we're sending the information is the same way that the other person receives it well? Otherwise, well, we get this mismatch and it doesn't work out real well. Everybody gets frustrated, and then, well, it isn't a great thing. What a player development plan is not. I guess I'll read the bullet plans, the common misconceptions. It's not a tournament schedule. Right? There's always tournaments. There's lots of tournaments. Having a tournament schedule is not a development plan. Tournament schedule should be part of the development plan, but it in and of itself is not the development plan. Is it a wish list for unrealistic dream outcomes? No, not really. It's not taking a 7-year-old and figuring out what's the path to take them through that 10,000 hours of practice it's going to have them winning a Grand Slam at some point in time. It's not that at all. Definitely not a tool for comparing your child with others. That's just not. Well, let's compare kids to themselves, where they are to where they're going, how much they've moved along in the process. So it's definitely not a tool for comparing your child to another. And last of all, having a plan isn't a guarantee of results or rankings. We're just not at that place. Nobody can guarantee. Well, I guess I can guarantee one thing, and I've said this for a long time. I can guarantee that I could get your kid to not reach the collegiate level. All I got to do is have a little bit of neglect, and they aren't going to get to that place. So that's not it. It's not going to be the thing that's going to get somebody to number one in your state, not even number one in your club. So real example available. Well, later on, I will show you a copy of a plan that I wrote a few years ago. It is available at theperformancearchitect.com if you want to look at it afterwards. It was just kind of what I used to do. What I do now is probably a little bit, it is a lot more comprehensive. It contains some more pieces. But this is an old one, and I think it's pretty comprehensive. You might look at it and you might say, wow, that's a lot. Well, it gets even more in depth as I've learned more and figured out more pieces to the puzzle. Supporting versus living through your child. I think we've all seen people who are living vicariously through their child. They're living and dying on everything that happens. They get to a tournament. We just had the Little Mo Nationals at Austin Tennis Academy this past weekend. And I walked in, and the first thing I saw was a parent sitting on a bench, and he's taken off his hat, and every time the girl misses a shot, he takes off his hat and he bangs it on his knee, and he's gesturing to her. And I said something about, sir, that's coaching, because they had a pretty long talk with all the parents during opening ceremony about what was and what is not acceptable. But don't live through your kid. This is something that they do, and it is not something that we do. I got called out on the carpet recently by somebody. I relayed a message that someone had said of, this is something that, or we do something, or we had something. And like last I saw, the child was out there by themselves. It's not a we compete. I know that I've had parents push back and say it absolutely is we. It's my money that's out there. And while it is your money, it's not you who's doing it. We are part of the team associated with the child. So, my youngest who played, all of my kids played to some level, but my youngest was the last one still playing, and her name's Cece. And so, we had Team Cece, and Team Cece was, at the end, me as a parent, the coaches at Lakes Tennis Academy in Frisco, Texas, as her coaches, and Cece was the player, and we were part of Team Cece. I got to be the one to support in many ways, go get water when she ran out during matches. I think that we've got to figure out how to support. As I've read various books or heard audiobooks, I don't read a lot anymore. Brad Gilbert's book was very interesting to me because he talked about how when he transitioned from being a player to being a coach, his role became 100% figuring out how to support Andre and what he was doing on the court. And that's the role of a coach, and it's not that dissimilar to what the role of a parent is. Critical distinctions. Supporting a child's dream. I think at first we know our kids don't necessarily have the dream. We take them and we put them in a whole bunch of different activities looking for the one that they're going to enjoy. Once they do, then they dream about these glories of grandeur, and they want to be the very best. And you'll hear, if you ask, a 6-year-old, what do they want to be? So many of them say, I want to be number one in the world. And they probably do want to be number one in the world. They just don't have any idea what it takes at that point in time. They're the ones driving the tennis journey. Initially, I think we probably all have these things of kids need to live up to commitments. And when we ask them, do you want to do this activity? Well, we're going to see it through for the season. I'm associated to a degree still with Austin Tennis Academy. Their programs are a year long. In the case of the lower programs, it's a school year. In the case of Academy, you sign up for a full calendar year, which starts when school starts and it runs until school starts again. I always, with my kids, had a thing of, well, you wanted to try this, and since you wanted to try it, you're going to stick it out long enough to fulfill your commitment, particularly if it was a team sport. You're making a commitment to other people in the program. Also, you're making a commitment to the program that you're taking a spot that could have gone to someone else. And then, as a parent, I was there to provide the resources to make sure they had a snack, make sure that they got some food when they get out of school before they got there, make sure that they had the proper equipment, the right shoes when their shoes were wearing out, that they had another pair, and doing the hard things too. I remember we were at a tournament at Baylor University, and my daughter had forgot her shoes, and she swore that she had packed them. And I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth in the morning, and she comes to the bathroom door and she's crying and she's like, Daddy, I know I packed them. I'm like, packed what? She said, my shoes. I don't have my shoes. And she had worn her Converse to the tournament, and so it's like, okay, I guess you're going to wear your Converse for the day. And while that was just a threat, and probably shouldn't have even done that, as soon as we finished warm-ups and Dick's was open, we went to Dick's and we got her a new pair of shoes. And then that became the extra pair of emergency shoes. So in case she had a blowout or something, that pair of shoes was always in her bag. So we were never having to deal with that again. And what does it look like when you're living the dream through your kid? You're talking about, my kid's going to be this good, and all of us that have had kids have thought about the other parents that are comparing. My child walked at this age, or my child talked at this age, and I look at it and I'm like, who cares? Like, we all get there at some point in time. And I don't look at anybody now and say, geez, I bet you talked at 13 months and you didn't walk until 22 months, or like, who cares? We all get there eventually. So being precocious is one thing. Oftentimes being precocious is about the other things that happen. So you look at your kid in tennis and they're really good, and well, you know, you had so many parties and so many balloons and you were busy tapping balloons up in the air or chasing a ball around with a dog, or the most common one is child had older siblings and they were just running around trying to keep up with the older siblings, right? We don't know that we're not supposed to be as good as somebody who's 2 years older when we're 2 years old. So we run around and we think that we're going to be that good, and that gives us an advantage over somebody who's a first child. You know, if we're living through our kid, we push harder. When we see our kid push back, we don't take the time to understand what it is they're truly saying to us at certain times. And so we just push. That's probably not great. And what happens when, you know, like I said, we just watched the Little Mo, when the timelines are all about you, not about them. When they're like, I'm going to be the best 10-year-old in the world. And at one point in time, I did coach someone who was probably the best 10-year-old in the world. He had won the Little Mo 8s. The next year, instead of playing Little Mo 9s, he won the Little Mo. He played Little Mo 10s, and he won it going away. He got to the round of 16 of the 12 and under Orange Bowl as a 12-year-old in the same tournament. The Dominic team, who was a couple years older, lost 2 rounds earlier. He was just really good. When I had been asked to take on coaching him, I had a real decision to make, because he was probably, like I said, the number 1 player his age in the world. And I looked and I said, is he probably going to be the number 1 player in the world in the pros at some point? And the chances were slim and none. Probably not even going to be that as an 18-year-old. And so, well, do I want to be around when the chances of him slipping, somebody else having gone faster and moving by him, was a very real possibility? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I want to give this a shot. Was he the number 1 18-year-old in the world? No. Was he one of the better ones? Absolutely. He ended up going on and winning the NCAA singles title his senior year, won 3 team championships while he was in college. And then he did okay as a pro. Some injuries and other things bit him. But when you let your emotions be what rules the day, that's probably not good. And I know that it is extremely hard when it's your own child to be able to keep those emotions in check. It's the hardest thing in the world. One of the hardest things in the world is to watch your child struggle at anything. I know I had kids late. I didn't have my first child till I was 35. And my friends had said to me, just wait till it's your own kid. And I was like, yeah, you don't understand. I'm the person that sat there with my arms folded and my sunglasses on, just taking mental notes of what it was going to be for the next month, 2 months, whatever. And then my oldest played soccer, 4 years old. And she was one of those that picked the dandelions and watched the ball go by. And it was so hard for me. So game's over. I don't think they kept score at that point in time, so I don't know if they won or they lost. But I'm livid. And so we're walking to the car, and I'm holding my little 4-year-old's hand, and I'm telling her, we're going to the hospital on the way home and having a blood test, because you can't be my child, because no child of mine could ever be that non-competitive. And yeah, so don't let your emotions be the thing that rule the day. What do you do when your child has passion, desire, and a reasonable modicum of talent? I really hate that word talent. To me, in tennis, I'll kind of give you my definition of what talent is in tennis. Talent is your ability to successfully execute something that you've never trained. So my goal was always train players on as many things as possible and don't let talent play a role. Now, is a donkey ever going to run in the Derby? No. Are there some people that just don't have the body types that they're going to be able to be successful at pro tennis? Yes, absolutely. As coaches, our job's not to pick the winners and losers. Our job is to take the person in front of us and help them go as far as their God-given abilities and their desire allows them. Yeah. So supporting means responding to their drive, while living through means creating drive that isn't naturally there. Let's kind of break that one down. So supporting means responding to their drive. Their drive. I thought that the best coaches in the world and the best parents of the world are the ones who see a spark in a child, and then so we kind of walk around and we flick matches at the feet of kids, and when we see the spark, we fan the billows and we watch them catch fire. If we become overbearing, we become a fire blanket, and we actually extinguish whatever fire that happens to be there. So, I think living through means creating drive that isn't naturally there. And we've all seen that. And if you do this long enough as a coach, you'll actually have a kid come and say, I don't want to be here today. I'm only here because my parents make me. And that's a bad buzz. So we don't ever want to be in that position. The science of development, periodization over tournament chasing. And I'm going to come back here for a second, just so you can see I am a real person. I'm here. Sitting here, I don't sit here very often. This is the first week of doing this. I used to do more live things and stopped doing them several years ago, and now I'm just getting back into it, trying to get comfortable. And so I guess I was hiding behind that screen. I'm going to go back to hiding behind it. I do sit and interview people a lot, so you'll see me on this other set, which is also here in the studio, where I sit and I interview people, interview kids, interview parents, interview other coaches. But I'm here at the moment. So just wanted to come out and say hi and thank you for watching this. I hope that we're getting some value out of it. I'm going to go back to hiding and talking here. So, science of development, periodization over tournament chasing. What is a plan? What should a plan look like? It's not chasing points. I heard somebody talking recently on a podcast about those families at the higher end of junior tennis that are running all over the world. So you see them running to places where the tournaments aren't very strong. Costa Rica, maybe a few places in South America, but they figure out where the tournament isn't very strong and they can afford it, so they go to get some points. Well, are points important? Points are certainly important. You have to get to a certain place before you can get into other events. We've just had a bunch of ITFs here in Texas. And then before that, there were some in Mexico, so J30s and J60s. And I believe the one that's this week is actually a J200. So the tournament stepped up a significant level, so a lot higher competition. You need to get the tournaments at the lower levels to get to the higher levels. If you're in the USTA system, then you think, well, I have to play L5s in order to get enough points to actually get into an L4 and an L3. And I got to play those and win enough in order to get enough points to qualify into hard courts, clay courts, indoors, Easter Bowl. So those L1s. So it's important to get points, but not to just chase points. Chase development. So I think if we take that player development plan and we take it from the tournament court, we say, okay, and this is my belief. My belief is that I want to train open, closed, open. And what does open, closed, open mean? Well, the open part is playing a tournament. Right, so that's the most open the game can be. You go out, you get to do anything. There's no rules other than you got to hit the ball over the net one more time than the other person. Got to stand behind the line after you strike your serve. Those types of rules. But other than that, it is very much open play. And then what we want to do is we want to take the information that we get from the open play and use it to develop a plan for a couple of reasons. There are things that will actually help the player. It enables us to reference why we're doing it. So you look at little Jimmy or Janie and you say, well, we're doing this because remember in the third set tiebreaker against Billy the Basher, and you couldn't handle the fact that he was coming at you all the time and you were choking on those passing shots. That's why we're working on it now. So it gives some context as to why we're working on it. It becomes very specific. It's not general. Coach just wants to work on this week. It is, So we take what we learn from the open environment and then we close it down, come up with a plan for how we're going to train it. And then after we've trained it for a period of time, we then go back into the open environment and we look at how does it hold up? Do we need to train it some more? Is it time to move on to something else? Maybe it's okay. We got to make sure that we don't leave it alone too much because it might fall apart if we do. So that type of thing is important. I like to think about things in 6-week schedules. We kind of know what the tournaments are. We look at tournaments strategically in terms of what's it for. Is it to test a skill under pressure? And maybe that's a lower level tournament. So we pick lower level tournaments where if we were to weigh performance versus outcome, that we're focusing more on performance. We don't care so much about the outcome. Maybe it's even the kind of tournament where you're doing something you wouldn't ever do against your toughest level of competition, but you're doing it at a low level, and you know that, well, if it's not even working at that level, then you're going to be able to then switch back to your A game and still pull it out, which gives you another tournament match to be able to try it some more. So that might be the kind of thing that you're doing. And then you get to the highest level of tournament that you're going to play, whatever that happens to be, whether it's a junior slam or your state qualifier, or maybe it's, you've been playing L7s, which, you get into an L7 if you are the lowest ranked person. That's where entry comes from the bottom of the entry list up as opposed to the top down for everything else. But you finally earned enough points that you're getting entry into an L6. And so, or maybe it's you've been playing L6s and maybe a couple of L5s, and now all of a sudden you're traveling for an L4. And so this is now the highest level, and you're doing everything you can to win. It's probably still not going to be enough, but what you're really looking for there is, well, what things do I actually do which are good enough for that level? And then gives you another good insight. Okay, those other things that might have worked at an L7, they don't work at an L5, and so therefore I need to knock that nonsense off. And there's another chance to get an evaluation. And so you go through this cycle of periodization where you're looking at pre-competition, and then competition, and then active rest, and then you're again training skills. And so you go through this cycle, and there might be mini cycles that happen real quick over a couple of weeks. Maybe it's a longer cycle. You can only peak about 3 times a year, and we know what's on the other side of every peak, right? It's a trip down into a valley, so it's not a linear, steady progression moving upward and through this process. So it's important that we look at it that way, that we find training blocks and we work on the appropriate things for those blocks. I think I just got a little ahead of myself and kind of went through this slide of, what are those tournament categories? So development tournaments where new techniques and tactics under competitive pressure, right? So I hear parents say, I'm not seeing progress yet. Well, tournaments is generally the last place that you see it. The first place that you see it is generally in a private lesson where the coach is able to control the environment and allows enough success that the player starts getting some confidence. The next place that you'll see it will be like in drills or practice matches because there's still not that pressure associated with it. And then there's tournaments, and I think unfortunately we've done a disservice to kids with all results being on the internet because kids are always looking at, how did you do? You had a good win or you had a bad loss, and instead of, I went out and I was working on something. So, then practice tournaments, so regional and local ones that are really just for match play. And the peak events, I think I already talked about that when you're playing at the highest level and the scale is tipped way more towards performance than anything else, right? If you are in the semifinals of a Grand Slam, you are much less concerned with how well you played than if you won or lost, right? So that is tipped absolutely 100% towards outcome and very little towards performance, whereas that first week of the tournament is a little bit more tipped towards performance. See those players that had a really great summer and they peaked a little too early. They get into a Grand Slam and they're on their way into a valley, so they've had a great few weeks, and that's a double-edged sword. So you have a great few weeks and maybe you're having more confidence, or maybe you're at the place where it's now time to take a break, to go into active rest for a minute. And I say active rest. What does active rest look like? Well, active rest is not, it can be swimming. It can be riding bikes. It can be doing a lot of things like that. It's not just resting. It's not playing video games. That's not it. So I'm not sure how I think about like doing TikTok dances for girls and things like that, but maybe if you're out and you're actively doing it and you're moving and you're trying out new moves and you're doing more agility stuff, maybe that works. Now we're getting into my world, communication and expectations. So I'm going to actually read this. Kids perform to the level of expectation. When you want your kids to be the best, you put them in something that demands the best. So study of parents that expect their kids to get A's in school versus parents that expect their kids to get hundreds in school. We all slip beneath what the expectation is sometimes. So kids whose parents expect them to get all A's every once in a while get some level of a B or maybe even an A minus. Kids whose parents expect them to get hundreds all the time, they also falter sometimes, but their falters tend to be 96s, 97s, and so they still remain where they're getting A's. So having high expectations. I think having low expectations. There was a time when I went with my oldest daughter to the George W. Bush Museum at SMU in Dallas. And we were walking through the museum, and all of a sudden I heard this voice, and I heard him say something of bigotry, and I was like, So I went over and I watched the exhibit, and it was a recording of a time when President Bush had said something about the soft bigotry of low expectations, right? So having low expectations for a player doesn't do them any favors. I think kids actually like things which are hard. And so having that high expectation all the time. I thought my high school football coach hated me. He was like, Evans, are you kidding me? You look like a traffic cop out there. You're just standing up, waving your arms around everywhere, and everybody else is down low, all in your legs. And I just thought, this man hated me. He was on me all the time. And then I was in Maine doing a 1-year PG program at Bridgeton Academy in Bridgeton, Maine, and I get someone knocks on the door to my room and says, I have a phone call on the payphone, right? So it was a long time ago. We still had payphones in dorms and things like that. And it was the recruiter for West Point. And I get on the phone with him, and he says, yeah, Coach Ty told me that you were the sleeper of the East, that people didn't know that you skipped 3rd grade, and so you were actually younger than a good number of the juniors on the team. And I was like, wow. So the person that was on me all the time was actually still my biggest cheerleader at that point in time, and essentially got me into West Point sight unseen. I went for my visit, hadn't applied. They said, we'll see you July 1st, sent me back to school, sent me a form letter, literally then, because we didn't have computers or anything, sent me a form letter to fill in the blanks, send it to Ted Kennedy, and next thing I know, it's July 1st, and I'm getting my hair shaved in at West Point. So, yeah, the soft bigotry of low expectation. It's important to be honest in how you assess things. Don't sugarcoat them so that the player thinks that they're more than what they should be. I think it's important to be accurate. It's important for everybody to be really clear on what they expect of everyone on the team. What is your role? And this isn't one of those parents' role is to drive the kids around and pay the bills. Like, I do not believe that at all. I believe that parent is the one person that has no divided loyalties. They want nothing but the best for that kid. When they do things, it is solely for that reason. Sometimes they don't have the best information, and so they go by other things. As an adult, we often get ahead in the world by outworking everyone, and we forget that when we were a kid, it wasn't necessarily like that. Kids don't get ahead by just outworking everybody else. That's not how kids learn. The science behind it is very different than that. So, and who has their kids play tennis, right? People who are successful, because who can afford for their kids to play tennis? Because this isn't a cheap sport. They're people who are successful. And oftentimes that hard driving nature, which enabled somebody to get ahead as an adult, they want their child to be like that. And it doesn't work like that. Do they need to understand all of the things that you learn, time management and task prioritization and sacrifice and all of those things? Absolutely. But I think it's important that we choose programs which demand success. I think A-type people want to be around A-type people. B-type people that want to slack a little bit, well, they want to be around C-type people. And so let's leave the B's and the C's and let's be A's. That's my take on it anyways, is, be around A-type people. Red flags versus healthy partnership. When I put this together, I'm not sure why, in almost every case, I put the negative stuff first, right? So maybe it's that crap sandwich. So, you give good stuff, so you lead in, and then I give all the negative, and then I finish with the positive. I don't know as I necessarily believe in crap sandwiches. I've had some child psychologists argue with me, telling me that that is absolutely not the right way to do it, but that's not what this presentation is about. Maybe we'll get into that one at a different time. But the warning signs. Parent consistently more upset about losses than the player. Woo! Have we seen that one before? I've probably been that parent at some point in time. I was notorious at one point in time for second place trophies got smashed in the parking lot. I was that negative person. Even till fairly recently, I've had kids, very young kids, 6, 7-year-olds that I was working with, who wouldn't tell me when they came in second, because they felt like that was me as a person. I was so demanding that I would probably do something silly like call it first loser or something. So, parents and coaches got to have the same level of thinking for winning and losing. I'm old enough to remember, I guess it was Vince Lombardi who said, show me the person who said winning isn't everything and I'll show you a loser. Well, is there any truth to that? Who knows? Maybe there is, but that's an old school way of thinking, and I think we should probably be more supportive of kids. So, constant questioning and second guessing, poor results. Well, maybe a kid's in a growth spurt, or maybe, there's something else, as a lingering injury that the player doesn't want to tell you that they're injured because they're afraid that you're going to be mad. There's a lot of those things. Obsessive comparing of child to peers rather than focusing on individual development. This, like I said, it isn't a linear thing. Maybe your child is being the best student possible and they're focusing on something that they really don't get, but they're going to use it in competition. They're going to use it because they're determined to do what the coach is asking, and they're going to get over that hurdle. But at the moment, they're stuck. And another kid is working on something that, was pretty easy for them to pick up. And so does it look like they're moving faster? Yes. Are they in fact moving faster? Yes, at that time. There'll be another moment when that other child will be at one of those crossroads where they're struggling and your child is in a free run for a period of time. And so we've got to kind of be aware of that and not compare to other kids. When we talk about biological versus chronological age, it's actually possible for two kids born the same day to be 4 years apart biologically. So chronologically the same age, but one is a +2 biologically and the other is a -2. That all works itself out in the end at some point in time. It's like that who walked first and who talked first. I don't know who went into puberty first and who's in a fast growth spurt period. And those things have a lot to do with how we should be approaching periodization, but not where your kid is versus another kid, right? Making excuses for poor performances instead of learning from it. So there's the opposite. Just kind of, my kid can do no wrong and I don't hold them accountable. Being, again, we go back to the slide before and talk about being honest, being accurate, being truthful to the best of our ability. And I know sometimes we think that being harsh is just being truthful. It isn't. We have to learn those communication skills, and it will help everybody along the way. The last one, changing coaches frequently when progress slows, right? I think you only get like 2 or 3 changes at the max before you've now spent so much time going backwards, particularly in the U.S. Unfortunately, here in the U.S., we're in a culture of we like how things look or we don't like how they look. And so every time you go to a new coach, they want to put their own stamp on it, even if what a child is doing is working perfectly well. I even used to say, I want a child to come to me with at least 3 years left in junior tennis, because it's going to be 3 years before we've made enough adjustments that what the player's game looks like is 100% now the things that we've worked on together or that we've decided that they had brought with them previously were good enough. And I've done a lot of that. There's a lot of things that I do that I got from players who came from other places. I'd be like, oh, where'd you get that drill from? Where'd you do? So those are the bad things. Let's go to the good ones. Healthy indicators. Primary focus on long-term skill acquisition over short-term wins. I got a lot of stories to tell over all of these weeks. Think about Jeffrey Morrison. Jeffrey Morrison was a player who was the same age as James Blake, so that same class. That was the first class of players that I spent a lot of time around when they were in juniors. And Jeff Morrison was one of those kids that the top kids expected they might see in the quarters of the round of 16, but he would flame out then. And Jeff would just rocket serves to the fence. And his dad would say, keep hitting it. And Jeff would. And kept losing. And then, he did well enough that he ended up at University of Florida. Well, freshman year, University of Florida, Jeff won the NCAA singles title. And several years later, in an era when Agassi, Sampras et al. Were still out competing actively, Jeff Morrison was the last American man left standing at Wimbledon. So there's a lot to be said for being that parent who understands what you're trying to do. While you might not be there yet, you gotta keep with it. Bullet point 2, patience with the natural ups and downs of development. We talked about mountains. On the way to a peak, on the other side headed to a valley. We just want to make sure that the peaks kept getting higher and higher, and hopefully that they're very shallow valleys. We don't want to go to a low peak and then down into a deep, deep valley. So genuine celebration of breakthrough moments in technique. Like, yeah, you finally got it. Like, that's amazing. Good for you. I used to say, it looks like the hiccups. All of a sudden, one day you come out and the player is trying half as hard and hitting the ball twice as big. That's when you know somebody got it. You don't know when it happened. It just all of a sudden is there. It's like you don't know when you have your last hiccup. So those are amazing moments to celebrate, because when somebody gets there, they worked their tail off in order to get there. Another healthy indicator, child leads the conversation about their tennis goals, right? Let them drive it. They'll talk if you create that open communication. They'll let you know what they want, and you can help provide guidance as a parent. You're the adult. If you're a coach, you're an adult. You have more life experience, and so you can help give them the tools to be able to take what's a dream, turn it into an actionable vision, and then work through that vision to make it a reality. Trust in the coaching process and development timeline. Right? I think that's one of those key things. I know that when I've had somebody do a major change, I've said things like, yeah, today it's going to probably feel like 1 out of 20 you figured out. The rest of them are going to feel like crap. At the end of this week, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 out of 20 feel good. Another 2 or 3, maybe 5 are going to feel like okay, and the rest are going to be still like I didn't get it. And over a period of time, all of it. And so kind of laying out that progression for them of where it will go. Well, when it turns out like that, everybody's much less likely to be frustrated. Now, coach said that it was going to happen like this. Oh, it's happening like this. I guess coach must have done this before or have some idea as to what it's about. I think that parents trusting coach's experience, or if you have a coach that doesn't have a lot of experience, trusting that you have somebody that cares about your kid enough to go find the answers and work through it with them, because the coach also wants to be better. I think those are some key traits. Player psychology challenge. The self-assessment problem. I believe in players having self-assessment. If you go and you look at the player development plan that I've written, it doesn't have that included in it. It is part of the process that I go through now with players, is have them rate themselves. So I will, if it's a teenager, older teenager, I will have them answer questions on a scale of 1 to 10. I don't do that with kids under the age of 11, because kids under the age of 11 can't think in those abstract terms. So things like, oh, it's pretty good. I can do it, but when I'm under pressure, it falls apart, or things like that. A younger kid can figure those things out rather than giving them a numerical scale to try and rate themselves on. But I believe that it's important for a player to rate themselves, have a self-assessment, so that we can see where they are. I can think about a young man, I think he was 11 at the time. This was just probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I asked him, where do you think you are on a scale of, 1 to 10, where 1 is what it looks like for a red kid on the first day of practice, and 10 being what you see on TV. And he rated himself an 8. And I just left it alone at that point in time. It's like, we've got to create some more awareness before we even start digging into this. We got to move you a little further down the road. So that looked like the thing to maybe not go through. When a kid talks, what's the first thing that they say? Unfortunately, talking to grandma as your first phone call after a match isn't necessarily great, because what does grandma ask right away? And probably the only thing that grandma asks, did you win? And so that's how kids learn pretty quickly how to talk, because you're at a tournament with a parent and you're calling grandma and you're doing those things. There's no coaches around, so you start talking in terms of wins and losses. And then we start talking as we get a little older of that kid had a high UTR and what a great win, or the kid had a lower UTR and it was a really bad win. And I think that those things are not great. One of the things that I use is I want kids, when I'm not there for their match, I want them to have a phone conversation with me. And if we have a 5 to 10 minute phone conversation, I want to have to ask them at the end of that time if they won or not. Because I want it to be so detailed about the performance things which happened. Did you figure it out? The kid was doing this. Did you recognize when they changed tactics? All of those types of things, that we don't have any discussion at all about winning and losing at the early stage. So, track development. If you're a parent, figure out what they're working on. Have a simple chart, and maybe we'll talk about charting at some point in time, but simple chart, CDIEW, 5 columns. C column, could the person have done it? D, did the person do it? I, was it in? E, was it effective? W, did he win? Those first 2 columns are the decision-making columns, could he, did he? And then the rest are the execution columns. So if we get checks in the decision-making columns and it's breaking down in the execution columns, then we know we go train execution. If it's breaking down and could he, yes, but he didn't. So it broke down that could he, no, probably not. Did he? Yeah, he tried it anyways. Well, those are decisions, and we now training the decision-making part of it. And so working on those types of things. So I want to teach players to be objective observers of their own game, not base it on good wins and bad losses, not base it on, I'd never beaten this person before and now I beat him, though that's one that we probably have to learn to celebrate. The other one is one that, this person's never beaten me and all of a sudden they did. Well, that's going to happen, because sometimes people everybody gets better. Everybody gets better. Nobody gets worse. People think, oh, I'm getting worse. No, you didn't get worse. Somebody else just happened to move a little bit faster at a certain period of time. And so we've got to be accepting of those things. The I can't intervention. We're back to here. And, this thing that I did, and I did it religiously, that every time somebody said I can't, I made them say, I can do it, just stick to it. It still rolls off my tongue to this day, because for decades that was the deal. And what were we doing? We were rewiring the brain, right? So we talk about neuroplasticity. That's one of those terms that we often talk about when somebody has a stroke. And so they've got to find ways of getting their brain, one side of their brain, to connect with the other side so that they can learn to do things again. If you've lost your ability to talk, oftentimes you can still sing, believe it or not. But figuring out those different connections and how do we wire them, and we can talk about myelin, we can talk about all kinds of things, but how do we create new connections? So by immediately not letting somebody dwell on the negative of I can't do something, then getting them to create a new connection to, okay, not I can do it. I mean, that's great, the little train that could. But the part at the end of the just stick to it. So having kids learn grit, resilience, tenacity, lots of words that come to mind when we start thinking about that. But we want to interrupt those negative thought patterns as quickly as we can. And so that's something that I've always believed. We don't it's hard to get somebody to change by berating them. And so the worst thing you can do is to say, don't do that anymore, right? So if you were to have a orange elephant behind you and somebody said, don't think about that orange elephant. So you're trying not to think about the orange elephant. Don't think about the orange elephant. I'm not thinking about the orange elephant. Well, all that time, what are you doing? Yeah, you're fixated on the orange elephant. What you need to do is to find the purple dinosaur in the other corner and begin thinking about the purple dinosaur. And the more you think about the purple dinosaur, the less the orange elephant is in your thought process. So immediately start thinking about what you want to do. And so having those conversations with kids of how to look towards the things that they want to do, how to play like they want to play, how to, play like you want to play when you're 16 years old or 17 years old. And instead of don't hit that silly drop shot anymore once you've already moved up and you have control of the point or whatever it happens to be. Think about, what do I want to do with this in the future? And let's spend however much time there is working on developing the skills we want rather than trying to unlearn skills that we've developed previously. So the negative traits psychologically, figuring out how to unwire those, well, that's a challenge. The young man who ended up winning the NCAAs and struggled. There's a movie called 50,000 Balls, and in that movie, I pulled him off the court in the quarterfinals of boys 12 hard courts in Little Rock. He was in the spin cycle going down the drain, and he struggled to do that, and we had a hard time helping him figure that out. Didn't figure it out till his junior year in college, and kudos to his college coach for getting his wife involved and figuring out how that could work. So develop positive patterns. Don't reinforce the negatives by trying to tell someone not to do it. Give them the positive one and let them chase after that. Measuring matters. How do you measure different things? I think mental things are really, really hard to measure. But I think it's important to find ways to measure that. Maybe I just read through technical metrics, serve percentage improvements, unforced errors, successful integration of new shots into match play. These are concrete, measurable skills that show real development progress, right? So we can look at all of those things. I think all of those are measurable. So are you recognizing the opportunity to move forward in the court, take the ball and move forward, versus are you running into the midcourt and then scampering back to the baseline? Those are some things that you can actually look at. Are you accelerating? Are you using neutral and open stances on the outside thirds of the court? All of those things are technical things that you can look at from tactical perspective. Pattern recognition in opponent's play, right? So figuring out what my opponent is doing. And so that's a really important thing in point construction. So understanding, where am I, where are they, what are my strengths and weaknesses, what are their strengths and weaknesses, what was the last ball that came at me, and what am I trying to do with the ball? Am I trying to neutralize, or am I trying to build an advantage, or what is it that I'm trying to do? Am I trying to make the person just hit one more ball? So all of those things are super important to be able to develop. And so looking at measuring those things? Did you make good tactical decisions? Did you have a plan? Did you have a plan when you walked out on the court? Did you write it down? Did you look at your notes to be able to coach yourself? Did you make notes on your notes to decide, well, what I'm working didn't work? And so can we look at it and say, well, I changed my tactics. And then we can look afterwards and we can do an assessment of, that was really smart. You saw that it was feeding into something that the other player liked. You're trying to break down their backhand, but what happened was they stopped moving out of their backhand corner, and what turns out that when they're balanced and stationary, they hit their backhand pretty well, so I needed to play more to their forehand, versus I was trying to, move them from side to side, and I was losing. And it turns out I was missing a lot of my shots wide by 3 inches. So what I really needed to do was, it wasn't my tactics that were faulty, it was my execution. And so I just needed to move my targets in a little bit. So instead of changing my tactics, I probably should have kind of figured out how to just move the ball inside a little bit more, hit to bigger targets, hit quality balls to bigger targets. And so those things are important. Mental strength, self-assessment accuracy, emotional regulation during tough matches. That's really hard, right? Tennis is the only sport I know that you can be out there by yourself for 3 hours, don't get to talk to the other person. When there's people all around, it's not like you're off on a walk or you're camping or you're doing something and there's nobody around and so you're left alone with your thoughts. You're left with tons of people all around, spectators watching, people on other courts, and somebody that you're competing with and sitting on the bench right next to, in many cases, every few minutes or so. And you don't get to talk to them. What a solitary thing that is, experience that is. So, it's hard. And these are, in many cases, we're talking about junior tennis, so we're talking about young people who, some of them are just naturally chatterboxes. They haven't figured out how to regulate themselves in those places. So it's important that we figure out all of those things and work toward it. Did I just lose my Zoom call? I think I did. Well, I'm still on YouTube, so I'm going to kind of truck right through these last couple slides. And then see where it is from there. Q&A time, figures. We get to Q&A. And the person that was here isn't here anymore. So we're not getting that Q&A, unfortunately. So looks like, let's see what else we have. Key takeaways. Just kind of look at that one for a minute. And your challenge this week, if you don't have a developmental plan, right, I'll let you look at it, but I'll just read through it. Schedule an honest conversation with your coach about creating a systematic 6-month developmental plan. Come prepared with questions about specific metrics and measurable goals. I think that's really important. Do a little bit of homework ahead of time. Be ready for the conversation. Don't just walk in cold and think that you're going to touch base on all of the touch points that you want to have. If you already have a plan, ask yourself the hard question: is this development plan truly serving your child's dreams and timeline, or is it yours? Be brutally honest with your answer. There's a little soul searching. And it's hard because we see things as we are, and we may believe we're doing it for one reason and we're doing it for a different reason. Gotta be honest, and maybe you have that significant other person in your life and you can ask them. and be ready for them to be honest with you. Don't get upset when they tell you something that isn't what you hope to hear. And then, regardless of your situation, pay attention to your child's self-talk. How often do you hear, I can't do something, versus I can? And maybe use my little tip about how to go through that and help your kid with the I can do it, just stick to it. Next week, we're going to talk about tournament strategy and how to use tournaments as development tools rather than validation tools. Going to dive deep into how do you select tournaments and what tournaments serve what purpose and how much should you be playing and what win-loss percentage should you be looking at and how does that all work out. And there's just, some resources. So the player development plan example is at theperformancearchitect.com/player-development-plan-example. And join our mailing list. Book a consultation for personal development plans. It's something that I do. So if you need one, it's something that I can do just interacting with you, your child, and your coach. It doesn't require me actually watching your child play at all unless you want me to serve that role as the coach. But I'm not an on-court coach anymore at this point in time. And lastly, thank you. Thank you. You can send me questions at Dewey@theperformancearchitect.com. You can send them to Facebook, or if you look at the YouTube, I guess you can post them in the comments on YouTube, and I will respond to them there. Thank you. This was a great first week. I guess it only goes set for the meeting to only be an hour, and it shut itself off at the end of the hour. So I'll set it for longer for next week. And thanks a lot. Take care.